The interrogation chamber stank of ozone and fear. Commander Lydia Voss hung suspended in gravity shackles, her uniform torn and bloodied. Dark hair matted against her skull. Around her, 7 towering HFY warriors formed a perfect circle, their ceremonial blade staffs pointing inward like the spokes of a deadly wheel. Each weapon hummed with barely contained energy, casting dancing shadows across the obsidian walls. "Human," hissed the lead interrogator, his chitinous faceplates clicking in what passed for amusement among his kind. "You have cost us 3 battle cruisers and 17,000 warriors. The hegemony demands to know how your pathetic species accomplished this impossibility." Voss lifted her head, spitting blood onto the polished floor. "Which part confused you most? The part where we turned your flagship into scrap metal, or the part where your invincible fleet ran screaming back to whatever hole you crawled out of?" The HFY's mandibles flared wide, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Round the circle, his companions shifted restlessly, their blade staffs crackling with increased energy. These were not mere soldiers, they were the Crimson Spears, the hegemony's most elite interrogation unit, each one a veteran of 100 conquered worlds. "Defiance serves no purpose here," the leader continued, his voice like grinding stone. "We have studied your kind for cycles. Humans break, they plead, they bargain. It is your nature, soft creatures who value individual survival above all else." Voss laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the chamber. "You studied us for cycles, and still lost 3 capital ships to a single human cruiser. Maybe you should have studied harder." The interrogator's secondary arms emerged from his torso, each one ending in razor-sharp claws. "Perhaps demonstration will loosen your tongue." He gestured to his subordinates. "Surround her completely. Make her understand the futility of resistance." The 7 HFY closed their circle tighter, blade staffs now mere inches from Voss's suspended form. Energy crackled between the weapons, creating a cage of lethal light. The temperature in the chamber rose as the weapon's power cores cycled to full charge. "Look around you, human," the leader snarled. 7 of the hegemony's finest warriors. 7 weapons that have carved through planetary defenses. 7 blades that have never known defeat. He leaned closer, his compound eyes reflecting the energy discharge. "You are one weak creature, broken and helpless. What can you possibly do against this?" Voss studied the formation with professional interest, noting the spacing between warriors, the slight tremor in one soldier's grip, the way another kept shifting his weight from foot to foot. Her augmented implants, hidden beneath synthetic skin, mapped firing angles and calculated probabilities. The HFY had made their first mistake. They assumed her capture meant her defeat. "You know what's funny about you bug faces?" she said conversationally. "You're all tactics and no strategy. You see the immediate threat, but you never think 3 moves ahead." The leader's mandibles clicked impatiently. "More deflection." "Begin the tell me something," Voss interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "In all your cycles of study, did you ever figure out why humans wear so many layers of clothing?" The HFY exchanged confused glances. The question seemed absurdly trivial given the circumstances. "Or why our ships carry so much redundant equipment. Why our soldiers always seem to have backup plans for their backup plans." Voss smiled, and for the first time since her capture, she looked genuinely pleased. "Did you ever wonder why, when you finally cornered one of us, we don't look nearly as scared as we should?" The lead interrogator raised his blade staff higher, energy crackling along its length. "Enough games. Answer our questions or 7 blade staffs." Voss said quietly, her eyes meeting each warrior in turn. 7 elite soldiers. 7 chances to end this quickly. She flexed her fingers, feeling the familiar weight of the microcharges sewn into her gloves, the explosive filaments woven through her uniform. The dozen other surprises the HFY had failed to detect during their hasty field processing. She looked up at the interrogator, her smile widening to show blood-stained teeth. "Is that all?" The chamber fell silent except for the deadly hum of charging weapons. In that moment of perfect tension, 7 of the galaxy's most feared warriors suddenly realized they might have made a terrible mistake. The human was still smiling. The explosion came without warning. Voss triggered the microcharges in her left glove first. the shaped blast severing her gravity shackles and sending her tumbling through the circle of startled HFY. She hit the chamber floor rolling, already pulling the monofilament wire from her boot sole as the aliens spun to track her movement. The nearest warrior, a scarred veteran with acid burns across his carapace, brought his blade staff down in a killing arc. Voss whipped the monofilament wire up to meet it, the molecular thin strand slicing clean through the weapon's shaft. The energy core destabilized instantly, erupting in a shower of sparks and superheated metal. The warrior shrieked as shrapnel tore through his thorax, green ichor spraying across the obsidian walls. He collapsed backward, clutching at the ruin of his chest. 6, Voss said calmly, vaulting over his twitching form. The remaining HFY reacted with military precision, their formation shifting to compensate for the fallen warrior. But they were thinking like soldiers, not like humans. They expected retreat, evasion, desperate flight toward the chamber's sealed exit. Instead, Voss charged straight into their midst. The interrogator leader swung his blade staff in a horizontal sweep meant to bisect her at the waist. Voss dropped into a baseball slide, feeling the energy weapon's heat singe the air above her head. As she slid between his legs, she triggered the second set of charges in her uniform's chest panel. The blast wave lifted the HFY off their feet and slammed them into the chamber walls. With bone-crushing force, one skull cracked like an egg against the obsidian, brain matter painting abstract patterns on the black stone. The other landed hard on his side, his primary arm bent at an impossible angle, but still clutching his weapon. For Voss corrected herself, coming up in a combat crouch. The wounded HFY tried to raise his blade staff one-handed. Voss grabbed a shard of metal from the first warrior's destroyed weapon and hurled it with inhuman accuracy. The jagged piece punched through the alien's compound eye and buried itself in his brain. He toppled forward, twitching once before going still. 3. The remaining HFY had finally adjusted their tactics. They spread out, using the chamber's full width, approaching from multiple angles. The interrogator leader circled left while his two subordinates flanked right, their blade staffs weaving hypnotic patterns in the air. Impossible, the leader hissed, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty now. You are unarmed, wounded, alone. Voss wiped blood from her mouth, her augmented muscles already metabolizing the combat stimulants her implants had released. See, that's your problem. You think weapons are things you hold in your hands. She gestured at the carnage round them. Everything's a weapon if you're creative enough. The first subordinate made his move, lunging forward with his blade staff extended like a spear. Voss sidestepped the thrust and grabbed the weapon's shaft just behind the energy projector. The HFY tried to pull back, but human grip strength, augmented by military-grade implants, was not something his species had evolved to contest. With a savage twist, Voss redirected the blade staff's point toward the second subordinate, who was closing from her right. The energy blade punched through his midsection, cauterizing as it went. He looked down at the glowing wound in amazement before collapsing. 2. The disarmed HFY clawed at Voss, with his free hands, his razor-sharp talons seeking her throat. She ducked under his swipe and drove her knee up into his thorax, with enough force to crack his natural armor. He doubled over, gasping, and she brought her elbow down on the back of his neck. The vertebrae separated with a wet crack. 1. The interrogator leader backed toward the chamber's sealed door, his blade staff wavering in his grip. This is not possible. 7 crimson spears. We are the elite of the elite. Voss corrected, advancing steadily, past tense. The HFY's mandibles clicked frantically as he keyed his communicator. Alert, alert. The human prisoner has. Voss triggered the final charge in her boot heel, launching herself across the chamber in a flying tackle. They hit the door together, the impact driving the breath from both their bodies. The alien tried to bring his weapon to bear, but Voss was already inside his guard, her hands finding the nerve clusters at the base of his neck. Wait, he gasped, his blade staff clattering to the floor. Information. I can give you information. Voss paused, her fingers poised over the pressure points that would send him into paralytic shock. What kind of information? The fleet. Positions, our weaknesses, the location of your captured comrades. His compound eyes bulged with desperation. "Surely the life of a Crimson Spear commander is worth—" "Actually," Voss said conversationally, "the life of a Crimson Spear commander is worth exactly this much." She pressed down hard. The HFY convulsed once and went limp. Voss stood over the carnage, breathing hard but oddly calm. 7 of the galaxy's most feared warriors lay dead around her, their weapons scattered like broken toys. She picked up the leader's blade staff, hefting its weight experimentally. Now came the hard part. 7 dead interrogators would be noticed soon enough, and the hegemony battle station probably held a few thousand more soldiers between her and freedom. She smiled grimly and started toward the door. Time to see what other impossible things she could accomplish today. The corridor beyond the interrogation chamber pulsed with bioluminescent veins that served as the HFY's equivalent of emergency lighting. Voss pressed herself against the curved wall, listening to the chittering alarm calls echoing through the battle station's organic passages. Her augmented hearing picked out at least 30 distinct voices, all converging on her position. She hefted the captured blade staff, its alien weight distribution awkward in her grip. The weapon's energy core hummed with enough power to punch through battle armor, but its targeting system was calibrated for HFY physiology. She'd have to rely on instinct and luck. The first patrol rounded the corridor junction at a dead run for soldiers in full combat carapaces, their weapons already charged. They stopped short when they saw her standing over their comrades' bodies, mandibles agape in shock. Voss didn't give them time to process the scene. She triggered the blade staff's maximum discharge and swept it across the narrow corridor. The energy beam sliced through the lead soldier's midsection, continuing through his companion's arm and into the wall behind them. Superheated metal sprayed in all directions as conduits exploded. The wounded HFY shrieked and stumbled backward, green ichor pumping from his severed limb. His partner tried to return fire, but Voss was already moving, using the interrogation chamber's doorframe for cover. Energy blasts scorched the walls where she'd been standing. Containment Protocol 7. One of the soldiers barked into his communicator. "The human has acquired Crimson Spear equipment. Repeat, armed human loose in interrogation section." Voss grimaced. Containment Protocol 7 meant they'd start sealing blast doors throughout this section of the station. If she didn't move fast, she'd be trapped in an increasingly small area with increasingly desperate aliens. She sprinted down the corridor toward the wounded soldiers, blade staff extended. The uninjured HFY tried to bring his weapon to bear, but the narrow space worked against him. Voss slid beneath his firing line and drove the energy blade up through his thorax. The smell of burned chitin filled the air. The wounded soldier had collapsed against the wall, trying to seal his severed arm with emergency foam. He looked up as Voss approached, his compound eyes reflecting her image dozens of times. "Please," he wheezed in broken standard. "I have hatchlings." Voss paused for a moment, studying his face. Then she triggered a short burst from the blade staff. So did the humans on Kepler Station. She retrieved a second weapon from the dead soldiers and checked its charge. 70%, enough for maybe a dozen shots. Not nearly enough for what was coming. The station's internal communication system crackled to life, the voice speaking in the harsh, angular HFY military dialect. Voss's implants translated automatically, all sections. "Human prisoner has neutralized Crimson Spear unit. Implementing lockdown procedures. Authorization Theta 79 for lethal force." A new sound reached her ears, the deep, resonant howl of a war horn. Not just one, but dozens, echoing through the station's passages. The HFY were calling in their heavy assault units. Voss ran harder, her augmented muscles pumping synthetic adrenaline through her system. The corridor ahead branched into a 3-way intersection, each passage leading deeper into the station. She chose the central route, following the subtle air currents that suggested it led toward the hangar bays. Behind her, the sound of pursuing soldiers grew louder, not just the chittering of infantry, but the heavy, rhythmic thumping of something much larger. She reached another intersection just as the blast door ahead began to iris shut. Without hesitation, she dove through the narrowing gap, feeling the door's edge scrape against her back. She rolled to her feet on the other side just as something massive slammed into the sealed barrier. The entire corridor shook, whatever was chasing her. It was big enough to dent reinforced battle station armor. Voss checked her weapons charge, down to 40%. She needed to find an armory, a supply cache, something. Fighting her way through an entire battle station with captured weapons was a losing proposition. A maintenance hatch caught her eye, its bioluminescent seal indicating it led to the station's service tunnels. She pried it open with the blade staff's energy projection and crawled inside. The service tunnels were cramped, designed for maintenance, drones rather than living beings, but they were also largely unmonitored, and they connected to every major system on the station. If she could reach the power distribution center, her implants mapped the tunnel network as she crawled, overlaying the station's schematics with real-time tactical data. 17 separate search teams were converging on her last known position. Heavy assault units were being deployed at every exit point. The HFY were treating her like a full-scale invasion force. In a way, she supposed she was. She reached a junction where the tunnel widened enough for her to stand upright. Through the transparent aluminum viewing port, she could see into the station's central command deck. Dozens of HFY officers scurried between control stations, their mandibles clicking in agitation. One of them, a massive specimen with gold-inlaid Carapace markings, stood at the primary tactical display. Even through the viewing port, Voss could hear his voice booming across the command deck. Double the patrols in every sector. I want that human found and terminated. Fleet Commander Crystal, her implants identified. Cross-referencing the facial recognition data. The architect of the Kepler Station massacre, personally responsible for the deaths of 30,000 human civilians. Voss smiled coldly and began working on the viewing port's locking mechanism. Maybe she couldn't fight her way through the entire station, but she could certainly make them regret not killing her when they had the chance. The battle station shuddered as another war horn sounded, this one close enough to rattle her teeth. Time to show the HFY what desperation looked like when it wore a human face. The viewing port's lock surrendered to Voss's improvised tools with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. She dropped silently onto the command deck's upper observation platform. 30 feet above the main floor where dozens of HFY officers coordinated the hunt for her. Fleet Commander Crystal stood at the central holotank, his golden Carapace gleaming under the bioluminescent displays. He was even larger than she'd expected, nearly 9 feet tall, with the scarred mandibles of a veteran frontline commander. The same mandibles that had ordered the execution of evacuation shuttles. At Kepler Station, status report, he barked at a subordinate. All blast doors sealed in sections 7 through 12. The smaller HFY replied. Heavy assault teams have reached the interrogation chamber. They report extensive casualties among the Crimson Spears. Crystal's compound eyes flared. How extensive? Total elimination, sir. All 7 units. The command deck fell silent except for the soft hum of electronics. Several officers looked up from their stations, mandibles clicking in what Voss recognized as the HFY equivalent of nervous laughter. Impossible, Crystal growled. 7 Crimson Spears do not fall to 1 unarmed human. Sir, the weapon. Scorch marks suggest she acquired blade staff technology during the engagement. Then how did she eliminate the first soldier to take his weapon? The fleet commander's voice rose to a roar. 7 elite warriors, dead, and you tell me a single Softskin accomplished this? Voss chose that moment to drop from the observation platform. She landed directly on the primary sensor ray, her combined weight and momentum shattering the delicate crystalline matrix. Sparks erupted as backup systems tried to compensate for the sudden data loss. Half the holographic displays flickered and died. The command deck erupted in chaos. Officers shouted contradictory orders while reaching for sidearms. Crystal spun toward the disturbance, his own weapon already in his massive claws. There's your answer, Voss said conversationally, rising from the wreckage of the sensor ray. She held a blade staff in each hand, their energy cores cycling to full charge. 7 elite warriors fall to 1 human because you've never learned to properly fear us. The nearest officer, a communications specialist with neural interface cables still plugged into his skull, tried to draw his weapon. Voss bisected him with a single stroke, the energy blade cauterizing the wound so cleanly he remained standing for a moment, before toppling into directions. "Kill her," Crystal roared. "All units, fire!" The command deck became a maelstrom of energy blasts and flying debris. Voss dove behind a console bank as the air above her head filled with deadly light. The HFY had superior firepower, but they were firing in an enclosed space filled with critical systems. Half their shots missed her entirely, instead striking power conduits, navigation computers, and each other. An explosion rocked the deck as the atmospheric processing station took a direct hit. Toxic gases began venting from ruptured pipes, adding a new element of chaos to the battle. Several HFY collapsed, their respiratory systems unable to cope with their own ship's contaminated air. Voss used the confusion to vault over her cover, both blade staffs spinning in deadly arcs. She caught a tactical officer in the throat, nearly decapitating him, then spun to drive her second weapon through another alien's thorax. Green ichor splattered across the deck, making the footing treacherous. But the HFY adapted quickly. The surviving officers spread out, using the command deck's multiple levels to establish crossfire positions. Their shots came closer, forcing Voss into increasingly desperate evasive maneuvers. A plasma bolt grazed her shoulder, spinning her round and sending one blade staff clattering across the deck. She dove after it, sliding on her belly through a pool of alien blood. Another blast scorched the metal inches from her face. "Enough." Crystal's voice boomed over the chaos. "Stand down. All weapons, stand down." The firing stopped. Voss found herself on her knees in the center of the command deck, surrounded by 24 HFY with weapons trained on her. Bodies lay scattered around the chamber, at least 8 officers dead, 3 more writhing in various states of dismemberment. Crystal approached slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the battlefield. "Remarkable," he said, his voice filled with grudging admiration. "Truly remarkable. Do you know what you have accomplished here, human?" Voss spat blood and glared up at him. "I've given you a preview of what's coming. You have eliminated more HFY in a single engagement than most enemy fleets manage in entire campaigns." He gestured at the carnage around them, officers with centuries of experience, elite warriors who conquered star systems, all dead. "And yet," he continued, raising his own weapon, "you are still just one small, fragile creature, and we are still a fleet of 10,000. Actually," Voss said quietly, "you're a fleet of 9,732. Crystal's mandibles clicked uncertainly. "What?" "Your long-range sensors are down," she said, nodding toward the destroyed array. "You can't see what's happening outside your own hull." Her smile was sharp as broken glass. 3 more of your cruisers just went dark. My people don't abandon their own commander. They never have. They never will." For the first time, doubt crept into the fleet commander's compound eyes. He gestured frantically at his subordinates. "Restore external communications. Get me a status report on all vessels." "Can't do that from here," Voss said cheerfully. "Your primary command nexus is slag. Secondary control is 3 decks down. And I'm betting your heavy assault teams are still tearing apart interrogation section, looking for me." The deck shuddered as something large impacted the station's outer hull. Then again, and again, Crystal's weapon trembled in his grip. You planned this, all of it, from the moment you captured me," Voss confirmed. "Humans don't just rescue their own, Commander. We make people regret taking them in the first place." The battle station's hull screamed as human kinetic. Penetrators tore through its outer armor plating. Whole sections of the command deck's displays flickered and died as the ship's superstructure flexed beyond design tolerances. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, Voss could see the brilliant flashes of ship-to-ship combat lighting up the void. "Impossible." Crystal breathed, his compound eyes reflecting the chaos outside. "Our scouts reported no human fleet movements in this sector. Your scouts are dead," Voss said matter-of-factly. "Have been for 3 days. We've been tracking your battle group since you entered the system." The deck shuddered again as another salvo found its mark. "Did you really think we'd let you interrogate a human officer without consequences? A communications officer, one of the few still alive, looked up from his shattered console. "Fleet Commander, I'm getting emergency transmissions from the Blood Ripper and Skullcrusher. Both ships report human vessels closing on attack vectors." Crystal's mandibles flared wide. "How many ships? Unknown, sir. Long-range sensors are completely offline, and the interference from battle damage is..." His report was cut short as the entire command deck lurched sideways. The artificial gravity generators struggled to compensate, creating a sickening moment of weightlessness before slamming everyone back down. The HFY around Voss stumbled, their weapons wavering. She didn't waste the opportunity, rolling backward. She grabbed one of the fallen blade staffs and triggered its maximum discharge into the nearest group of officers. The energy beam carved through 3 aliens before striking a support pillar, which exploded in a shower of superheated metal fragments. 2 more HFY went down screaming, their carapaces punctured by flying debris. "Kill her," Crystal roared, but his remaining officers were already scattered. Seeking cover behind whatever remained of their workstations, Voss sprinted toward the viewports. Using the command deck's multiple levels and destroyed equipment as cover, energy blasts followed her, some missing by inches, others finding their mark in already ruined displays and consoles. She reached the observation platform just as another massive impact shook the station. Through the viewport, she could see the human fleet in all its terrifying glory. 12 heavy cruisers advanced in perfect formation, their hulls scarred by countless battles, but their weapons firing with mechanical precision. Behind them came twice as many destroyers and frigates, darting between the larger ships like hunting hounds, and beyond them, barely visible against the star field, the angular silhouette of a human dreadnought, one of only 6 such vessels in the entire fleet. The HFY battle group was larger, but they had made the fatal mistake of clustering around their command station. Now they were trapped in a tactical nightmare, unable to maneuver effectively while under constant bombardment. "My God," breathed a voice behind her. Voss spun to find Crystal approaching, his weapon lowered, staring in amazement at the battle raging outside. "How many ships do you have out there?" "Enough," Voss replied. "More than enough." As if to emphasize her point, one of the HFY cruisers, the one designated Blood Ripper, suddenly bloomed into a miniature star. Its reactor had been breached, and the resulting explosion vaporized to smaller vessels caught in the blast radius. The shockwave reached the command station moments later, cracking several viewports and sending everyone tumbling. When the artificial gravity reasserted itself, Voss found herself face to face with the fleet commander. His golden carapace was cracked, green ichor leaking from multiple wounds, but his eyes burned with desperate fury. "If I die," he snarled, "I'm taking you with me." He lunged forward, claws extended. Voss tried to bring her blade staff up, but Crystal was faster than his bulk suggested. His talons raked across her chest, tearing through her uniform and into the flesh beneath. She gasped and stumbled backward, blood flowing freely. The fleet commander pressed his advantage, his massive frame bearing down on her. They crashed through the observation platform's railing and tumbled to the main deck in a tangle of limbs and weapons. Other HFY officers closed in, sensing their chance to end the threat. But they had forgotten about the human fleet. Another kinetic penetrator struck the command section, this one close enough to breach the inner hull. Atmosphere vented explosively through the rupture, creating a howling wind that sent debris flying like shrapnel. 2 HFY officers were caught in the blast and sucked screaming into space. Emergency bulkheads began slamming shut throughout the command deck, sealing off the breach but trapping the survivors in an increasingly small space. The air grew, thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning electronics. Voss and Crystal rolled apart, both bleeding, both desperate. The fleet commander's weapon had been lost in the chaos, but his natural claws were weapons enough. He slashed at her face, missing by millimeters, his talons gouging furrows in the deck plating. Voss drove her knee up into his thorax, feeling his natural armor crack under the impact. He doubled over with a sound like breaking glass, but his secondary arms shot out to grab her throat. His grip was like a mechanical vice, cutting off her air supply. She clawed at his arms, feeling consciousness starting to fade. Around them, the remaining HFY officers watched in fascination, their weapons trained on both combatants, but afraid to fire with their commander, so close to the target. Then the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing the command deck in hellish red light. In that moment of darkness, Voss had managed to draw the ceramic knife from her boot, the one piece of equipment the HFY had somehow missed. During their initial search, she drove it up under Crystal's jaw, feeling the blade sink deep into soft tissue. The fleet commander's grip loosened as green ichor poured from the wound. He staggered backward, mandibles working soundlessly, then toppled with a crash that shook the entire deck. The surviving officers stared in shock at their fallen commander. In that moment of hesitation, the human dreadnought's main guns spoke. The command station simply ceased. One moment it was there, a massive structure bristling with weapons and armor. The next, it was an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and metal fragments. Voss felt the deck disappear beneath her feet. As the station's death throes began, the escape pod's emergency beacon screamed into the void as debris from the shattered command station tumbled past its reinforced hull. Voss pressed her face against the small viewport, watching the HFY battle group's death throes play out against the star field. She had barely made it to the pod bay before the station's main reactor went critical. Half the surviving HFY officers had been caught in the explosion, their screams cut short by vacuum and radiation. The other half were probably sharing similar escape pods, if they were lucky. But the battle was far from over. Through the swirling debris field, she could see at least 6 HFY cruisers still fighting, their weapons blazing as they tried to break through the human encirclement. They had abandoned any pretense of formation now, each ship fighting desperately for its own survival. The human fleet had taken losses too. One of the heavy cruisers drifted powerless, its hull split open like a gutted fish. Two destroyers were nothing but expanding gas clouds, their crews vaporized when HFY plasma torpedoes found their mark. Even the mighty dreadnought bore scorch marks along its armored flanks, but for every human ship lost, 3 HFY vessels burned. Voss's escape pod shuddered as a piece of station hull tumbled past, its mass creating gravitational eddies that threw her against the restraint harness. She keyed the pod's communication array, hoping some of the human ships were monitoring the emergency frequencies. "This is Commander Lydia Voss, service number Alpha-7-7-9er-Delta." She transmitted, requesting immediate pickup from coordinates. She checked the navigation display. Grid reference Tango 447. "I have critical intelligence on HFY fleet deployments." Static answered her for long moments. Then, cutting through the electromagnetic interference from the battle, came a familiar voice. "Voss, you magnificent bastard, is that really you?" Captain Marcus Vale of the Un's Retribution, her old commanding officer from the war's early days. She had served as his XO during the siege of Proxima, back when they were all still learning how to fight the HFY. "Marcus," she laughed, feeling genuine relief for the first time in days. "I should have known you'd come looking for trouble. What's your tactical situation?" "Could be better," Vale replied, his voice tight with concentration. "We've got them outnumbered, but these bugs are fighting like cornered rats. 3 of their cruisers are making a run for the jump point, and we don't have enough fast ships to intercept them all." Through the viewport, Voss could see the fleeing vessels, dark shapes accelerating hard toward the system's edge, where they could engage their faster-than-light drives. If even one escaped, it would carry word of the human fleet's position and strength to the rest of the HFY armada. "I can help with that," she said, studying the tactical display on her pod's limited sensors. "What's the status of the dreadnought's main guns?" "Charging for another salvo. But those cruisers will be out of range in 6 minutes. We can maybe get one of them." "What about the debris field?" There was a pause. "What about it?" Voss smiled grimly. "Remember the Battle of Cygnus? When we used the asteroid field to channel the HFY fleet into a kill zone? That was different. Those were stable asteroids, not expanding debris clouds. But the principle's the same. Look at your tactical display. Really look at it. The debris from the command station isn't expanding randomly. It's following predictable trajectories based on the explosion's energy vector. and the local gravitational influences. She could almost hear Vale's mind working through the implications. He had always been brilliant at improvisational tactics. Son of a bitch, he breathed. You want us to use the debris as a targeting solution. The largest fragments are following hyperbolic orbits that intersect the escape vector at. She ran quick calculations in her head. Grid references Papa 7 through Papa 12. If the dreadnought fires into that debris field at the right moment, the kinetic energy will deflect the fragments into a spread pattern, creating a wall of high-velocity projectiles, right in the path of the fleeing cruisers. Vale finished. It's insane. It's human, Voss corrected. There's a difference. She watched through the viewport as the UNS Leviathan, the dreadnought, began adjusting its firing solution. The massive ship's main guns, each one the size of a building, tracked slowly across the debris field. Targeting lasers painted ruby lines through the swirling wreckage. Firing solution locked, came the dreadnought's weapons officer over the comm. All ships, clear the target zone. The human fleet scattered like startled birds, their captains trusting in calculations they couldn't verify and tactics they'd never seen before. Only humans would attempt something so audacious with so little margin for error. Voss held her breath as the countdown reached 0. The Leviathan's main guns fired in sequence, their hypervelocity projectiles invisible except for the brief flashes when they struck debris. The first impact sent a twisted section of station hull tumbling end over end toward the fleeing HFY cruisers. The second projectile struck a cluster of smaller fragments, creating a spreading cone of high-velocity shrapnel. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The debris continued its stately dance through space, following the immutable laws of physics. The HFY cruisers maintained their desperate flight toward the jump point. Then the first cruiser, the one designated Gutrender, flew directly into the path of a spinning hull fragment the size of a city block. The impact was catastrophic. The cruiser's forward section simply vanished, vaporized by the collision's kinetic energy. The rest of the ship tumbled out of control, its hull splitting open along stress fractures, atmosphere and crew spilling into vacuum. The second cruiser tried to evade, its pilot throwing the massive vessel into a spiraling dive that would have been impressive if it hadn't been futile. Smaller debris fragments peppered its hull like shotgun pellets, each impact weakening the armor, creating fractures that spread like spider webs across the alien metal. When a piece of station superstructure punched through the cruiser's reactor housing, the resulting explosion lit up the entire debris field like a second sun. The third cruiser almost made it. Its captain had seen what happened to his companions and adjusted course, diving below the debris field's main concentration. For a few precious seconds, it looked like he might reach clear space. Then a single fragment, a piece of twisted metal no larger than a ground car, struck the cruiser's engine nacelle at a relative velocity of 15 kilometers per second. The ship didn't explode. It simply stopped. One moment it was accelerating toward freedom. The next it was drifting powerless, its main drive disabled, its hull cracked open like an egg. Jesus Christ, Vale whispered over the comm. Voss, that was beautiful. Through the viewport, Voss watched the crippled cruiser begin tumbling slowly, its emergency lights blinking futilely in the darkness. There would be survivors aboard. HFY were tough, and their ships were built to withstand tremendous punishment, but they weren't going anywhere. 3 days later, Voss stood on the bridge of the UNS Retribution, her wounds dressed and her uniform replaced, watching the final interrogation of captured HFY officers. The irony wasn't lost on her. Now it was the aliens, who found themselves suspended in gravity shackles, facing questions they didn't want to answer. But the humans conducted their interrogations differently. No blade staffs, no torture chambers, no crimson spears, just quiet rooms, patient questioners, and the inexorable pressure of logic applied by minds that had spent centuries perfecting the art of extracting information. Fleet deployment patterns, Captain Vale reported, reading from a data pad, staging areas for their next offensive, supply line vulnerabilities, command structure weaknesses. He looked up at Voss with something approaching awe. Your little adventure has given us enough intelligence to plan operations for the next 6 months. My little adventure nearly got me killed, Voss replied dryly. Next time, maybe we could try a more conventional approach to intelligence gathering. Where's the fun in that? Vale grinned, but his expression quickly grew serious. Voss, what? You accomplished in there. I've been fighting these bastards for 5 years, and I've never seen anything like it. A single human officer, captured and supposedly helpless, eliminating an entire elite unit and crippling a battle station. The psychological impact alone. He gestured toward the tactical display, where red icons marked the positions of HFY fleets throughout the sector. 3 more battle groups have requested reinforcement since word of this engagement spread. They're scared, Voss, for the first time since this war began. They're genuinely afraid of what we might do to them. Voss studied the display, noting how the alien formations had shifted to more defensive postures. The HFY had built their strategy around the assumption that humans were predictable, that they would retreat when overwhelmed, surrender when captured, break when tortured. She had shattered that assumption with 7 dead Crimson Spears and a battle station full of corpses. Good, she said quietly. Fear makes them cautious, caution makes them slow, and slow enemies make mistakes. A communications officer approached, offering a sealed data packet. Commander Voss, priority message from Fleet Headquarters. She took the packet and broke the encryption seal. The message was brief but significant. Priority Alpha transmission from Fleet Admiral Chen. Strategic Command to Commander L. Voss, UN's Retribution Classification. Eyes on like Commander Voss. Your actions at Grid Reference Tango 447 have been reviewed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The tactical innovation demonstrated in your escape and the subsequent destruction of HFY. Battle Group 7 Alpha represents a new paradigm in asymmetric warfare, effective immediately. You are promoted to captain and assigned to command the UN's Vindication, a newly commissioned heavy cruiser. Your mission: establish and lead a deep reconnaissance unit specializing in high-risk intelligence operations behind enemy lines. The HFY call you the Demon in Human Skin. Make sure they remember why. Admiral Chen's strategic command. Voss read the message twice, then handed it to Vale. His eyebrows rose as he scanned the text. Captain Voss, he said formally, then broke into a grin. Congratulations, though I have to say, Demon in Human Skin has a nice ring to it. The HFY always were poetic, she replied, even when they're being insulting. Through the bridge's main viewport, she could see the debris field from the destroyed battle station, still glowing faintly with residual radiation. Somewhere in that expanding cloud of metal and organic matter were the remains of Fleet Commander Crickstall and his Crimson Spears, the aliens who had made the fatal mistake of asking if 7 blade staffs were all she had to fear. Captain, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the crippled HFY cruiser. They're requesting permission to speak with you personally. Vale frowned. That's unusual. HFY don't normally request specific individuals for negotiations. Put them through, Voss said. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of a damaged alien ship. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh shadows, and she could see hull breaches sealed, with emergency foam in the background. The HFY officer who appeared on screen was young by their standards, his carapace unmarked by the ritual scarification that indicated combat experience. I am Sub-Commander Krauthik of the cruiser Bone Crusher, he said in heavily accented standard. I have been instructed by my superiors to convey a message. I'm listening. Voss replied that the young HFY's mandibles clicked nervously. The hegemony acknowledges your tactical prowess. The destruction of the Crimson Spears was unexpected. We wish to propose an exchange of prisoners. What kind of exchange? We hold 17 human prisoners taken during the assault on Kepler Station. We offer their return in exchange for... He paused, as if the words were difficult to speak. In exchange for your guarantee that you will not personally participate in further raids against hegemony installations. The bridge fell silent. 17 human prisoners, survivors of the massacre that had claimed 30,000 lives. Vale looked at her questioningly, but the decision was hers to make. Voss smiled coldly. Sub-Commander, I appreciate the offer, but I'm afraid I have to decline. The alien's compound eyes widened. You refuse. But these are your own people. Yes, they are. And do you know what my people would say if they knew I'd traded their freedom for my retirement? She leaned forward, her image filling the screen. They'd say I was a coward. They'd say I was weak. They'd say I wasn't worthy of the uniform I wear. She paused, letting her words sink in. But more importantly, Sub-Commander, they'd say I wasn't finished with you yet. The young HFY's mandibles began clicking rapidly, the alien equivalent of nervous laughter. You see, Voss continued, the problem with your offer is that it assumes I'm the only human capable of doing what I did to your battle station, that I'm some kind of unique threat that can be neutralized through negotiation. Her smile widened, showing teeth. But I'm not unique, Sub-Commander. I'm just another human officer doing her job. And there are thousands more just like me. She gestured toward the viewport, where the debris field continued its slow expansion into space. Every human in this fleet saw what happened here. Every human in this sector will hear the story. And every human who hears it will remember that when the HFY surrounded one of our own with blades, she asked if that was all. Voss's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. What do you think they'll do when they find themselves in similar situations? The Sub-Commander's image flickered and died. As the transmission was cut from the alien ship, Vale whistled softly. Think they'll accept that answer? Does it matter? Voss replied. They're going to learn the same lesson whether they accept it or not. She turned toward the bridge's exit, already thinking about her new command, her new mission, and the countless ways she could make the HFY regret starting this war. Besides, she added, pausing at the threshold, someone needs to teach them what happens when you underestimate human ingenuity. As she walked away, the bridge crew could hear her humming softly, an old Earth song about impossible odds and the people who face them anyway. Behind her, the debris field sparkled in the starlight, a monument to the price of underestimating humanity. The war was far from over, but the galaxy had learned something important about the species from Sol 3. When you surround a human with blades, you'd better make sure you have enough blades, because humans always ask if that's all you've got, and they're usually disappointed by the answer.